Hello, Australia, and welcome to the plebiscite BAP. It is the 13th of August 2017. My name is Franco, and joining me are the postal kids, Jason and Dean.
Are
G'day,
we
Franco.
coming to them live via their post box?
Optionally.
Some kind
It's
of
not mandatory.
plebiscite bubble, not necessarily progressive, not necessarily conservative.
Do people under the age of 40 still check their mail box these days?
I don't. I'm terrible at it.
So,
Anything I can have, because you know how that BAP view where you can get your bills coming straight to your bank account, you just pay them out of there.
Yep.
I have that set up for about 90% of my expenses in my life, except my rates. The number of times I fail to pay my rates anywhere near on time is 100%.
I don't have that set up, but I use Gmail, and Gmail tends to look at my mail for me, my email for me,
It's
and
creepy.
tell
when it
me
does
if there's a bill in there. It
Yeah.
says, "Hey, by the way, have you paid this yet?" I go, "Thank you, Google. I will pay it now."
that. You don't say fuck off, Google, stop spying on me.
Well, I haven't seen it where it's been to a detriment to me yet.
I had my because I got a
At the
Google
moment,
Pixel
Google is
phone.
not being evil, but
I got a Google Pixel phone that does the Google Now thing, and so whenever you're inside a shopping center, your phone will go off in your pocket. You go, I got a text message. No, you don't have a text message. It's your phone saying, "Oh, it looks like you're in the Galleria. Would you like to see a map?" It's like that's a bit creepy.
I think I remember telling you guys about Google Plus before you had your Android.
Yeah,
And you were like, we've got Apple products. And I went, well, it's kind of useful. And I had it when we were traveling around even South America and stuff, and it was incredibly useful. And then I think you told me that story about the first time you ever got buzzed by Google Plus to let you know that, hey, I know where you are and what you're probably doing.
yeah,
So here, can I help you?
it's creepy.
Yeah, but pretty useful. I mean, you look at it, most of those panels, there's normally something on there that you might find useful, like weather,
Maybe
bus and train timetables.
I feel like imagine if we were just out and about and Frank creepily popped up and he said, "Hey guys, looks like you're trying to get some drinks. Do you want me to get you those beers for you?" That would be all right the first time. Right? The 100th time where he's like, "Oh, Chase, looks like you're desperately trying to find somewhere to take a shit. Do you want me to help with that?"
Where's the nearest toilet?
Yeah.
How about I can tell you?
Oh, hey, you guys, you look like you're out and having fun. How come you didn't invite me? As per usual, this is the douchebag segment
Well,
of
we
our
were filtering douchebags perfectly well.
Yeah, we were. I think we're doing a good job.
Look at the viewer count. Douchebags are at 0.
show. As we are prone to do and enjoy doing, we'd like to do a Game of Thrones
Recap.
episode recap.
This
What
is only going to be a thing for another 3 weeks.
I know, it
Let's
was
find
only-
another series after that.
Okay.
When's The Expanse or Westworld all coming up? Because,
Don't know.
you know, Franco
HBO should be doing Westworld. It followed on from Game of Thrones last year.
Franco needs to catch up on The Expanse because I will expect him to be up to date.
I have seen half of episode 1.
You also need to be up to fucking date because this is
How many seasons are there? 2?
2,
Right, so I have a bit.
and they're not really long seasons either, but they're good. They're good. Catch up, boys. You need to.
Yeah, the half of season 1, episode 1 that I watched was good.
You watched a half ep.
Yeah, I was at a friend's house helping him set up a Raspberry Pi media center, and he was like, "You got to watch this show," and he put it on. I was like, "Oh, The Expanse.
Oh,
This is the shit that Jason recommends."
yes. But then again, he recommended that Sense8, and we know all that ended. How that ended.
I didn't like Sense8.
I know you didn't.
I didn't dislike it. It was beautifully shot. It's just I didn't like the story so much, and the writing was kind of ordinary in places.
Yes, we've had that discussion.
And no female characters had significant plot lines in that first
It's
season.
funny how possibly the most
I didn't watch the
diverse
second
program that's ever been produced, Dean managed to find it as being the most regressive program that he'd ever seen.
No, it was just
one perspective in this show.
it was just noticeable.
Kind of easy.
It was noticeable
It's
that
kind of
like,
weird.
just the dudes had stories.
Kind of weird. It's like, oh, that's odd. Okay.
So coming back to a
Game
show
of Thrones?
we can universally agree we enjoy most of the time, Game of Thrones.
Yeah,
Episode 4 started off at Winterfell, where the Finger, who doesn't have enough plot armor
The
to
Finger
surely
now.
carry on much longer, brought up the mysterious, long-forgotten Valyrian Steel's dagger.
yeah.
I was talking to actually Jason's son about this last night. Because in the books, which he's read and I've read, we were both like, that dagger was given to the assassin by Joffrey. But apparently in the
not-
show,
it's
no
not
one's
clear in the
yeah,
show.
It's not clear.
Not clear at all in the show. It's mentioned, in
So-
fact, because I've started my journey of rewatching all the Game of Thrones episodes, and there's no mention of Joffrey at all. It's Littlefinger identifies it as being the dagger that Tyrion won off him at a tourney, and that's as far as the identification of the dagger's owner goes. They said, well, he may have lost it, someone may have stole it from Tyrion, but it's not acknowledged. So it's kind of odd because up until that point, the only person we know who owned that dagger was
Tyrion or
was
Littlefinger.
Is it perhaps just an element of the short-sightedness of the writers at the time when they were writing season 1? They wanted to sort of imply the imp may have had participation in the assassination, and
They certainly
As it
did
turned out, he
because it
didn't,
was a
but-
major plot point that Catelyn Stark thought he was
exactly.
guilty of it.
But
so
now they've brought the dagger back in, but they're just hoping that everyone forgot
Yeah.
how it's.
how it came about.
Yeah.
And the fact they never really clarified who gave that dagger to that guy because it certainly wasn't Tyrion, obviously. And then my other favorite, possibly one of my favorite lines from the came from that little segment was the chaos is a ladder.
Well, that's from a previous segment.
Oh, was that? Sorry, no, that was when he gave him the dagger
Yes, I know, but that line itself comes from a conversation
because it
between
was a callback. Yes,
Varys and.
but
Littlefinger.
it's not the particular. It's not that actual line that I thought was so good. It was the fact that he looked
It
at.
certainly wasn't Bran's delivery of the line.
It's the way Littlefinger looked when it got delivered. It was like, there was a bit of a. I've been caught out. I don't know exactly what's going on here.
Yeah.
This
How
kid-
much do you know?
This kid may know more than I really want him to. Yeah.
And also in the whole Winterfell segment, we still see Bran's continuing to be a massive cock
Yeah.
in his treatment of friends and fellows. He pretty much showed
felt pretty-
indifference to Mira, saying that she wanted to.
Mira was
return.
like MVP for Team Bran,
yeah.
and he showed a complete disregard.
Yeah, I mean it's a bit harsh. I mean, you don't know if these kids when they pick them up at the age of 6 whether they're going to be actors and whether they're going to be skilled actors later on in life. And Bran obviously he's struggling with doing the emotionless, distant sort of role, but maybe that's a perfect
think
role
he's
for
doing
him.
Maybe they should cast him as the replacement for Scarlett Johansson in Ghost in the Shell 2, because his performance is on par with hers.
Well, he'd have to be a little more acrobatic than he is in this one, wouldn't he? But then you get someone like Maisie Williams, who is a fucking fantastic actress, and from such a young age, so like really solid actress. Even Sansa Stark is really good, but it's a bit hit and miss when you're.
I wonder if
when
there's
you're
a-
a kid.
Sophie Turner, by the way.
Yeah.
Wait, you're using everyone else's names,
Yeah,
and then you're
for
like,
some reason I didn't know hers, but that's
I
okay.
wonder if there's an unwritten rule with the scriptwriters that Bran
I
and
don't know
Daenerys are
Bran's
not
rule.
allowed to be in the same
As
scene
a-
together.
Hempstead
Oh,
Heath.
right.
Something.
So you don't know the cripple guy's name? Is that what
He's got a hyphenated name. It's a long hyphenated surname. It's Isaac's his first name. I got that part. Isaac Hempstead Wright, maybe.
So yeah, there was the bit where Littlefinger suddenly realised that maybe he isn't in total control of the situation.
He's been out of control.
But that's
for quite some
okay.
time.
He doesn't need to be in control, Jason, because chaos
Is a ladder.
is a ladder.
And finally, the final part we saw at Winterfell is Brienne is a Class A motherfucking assassin. Take on Brienne.
No.
And showing the skill
Ari
set.
is the assassin.
Sorry, the
Ari.
assassin.
Who did I say? Oh,
You said
Brienne.
Brienne. You had
Sorry.
Brienne on the mind.
I mean,
It was a pretty good scene. I did
Yeah.
like it.
she looked
Oh,
awesome.
it was good for story development. It was very bad for physics. She had a small little rapier, and she was parrying and deflecting blows from what looked like a bastard
She was
sword.
water dancing, Dean. She was water dancing.
The only bits I liked was where she actually dodged, like when she
Yeah.
bent over backwards. Like that was fine. She should have been moving around a hell of a lot more if she wants to avoid
Yeah.
the leverage coming down from the end of that sword.
You're being a little bit harsh.
No,
I think you are.
Her arms would have been shot, taking the full brunt force.
She wasn't
of-
taking the full brunt. She was
in
moving.
some of the
in
shots.
some of the shots, usually like ching ching, and it was like really.
No. That blade would have come out of her hands or would have
Okay.
reverberated through her arms, knocking her elbows out
Yeah.
and shoulder out.
The blade would have come out of her
Okay.
hands. She's a child. The blade would come out of her hands.
but it looked
and maybe she'd won it with some case of.
Fair enough. It's a
Rapier
land full of
elbow.
dragons, but you're worried about the physics on a couple
No,
of
no.
swords.
I
That's
like
fine.
the scene a lot. I just wish they had have had her move water dance more.
Yeah.
But at the same time,
Water
she's
dance.
a young child
Water
actress,
dance.
and what she did with that scene was fantastic.
It was really good.
She made it believable, even though the physics suggested otherwise. How's that? Can we have that?
Yeah.
You gonna let that one pass, Jason?
Come on, Franco. You know how BJJ works. You can use the weight against them. You don't need to.
Not quite.
She wasn't though. She was deliberately
Maybe
putting
not
her
at your
blade
skill
in the
level,
way, trying
but
to
at
oppose.
kick-ass world-class assassin skill level, who knows what's possible?
Maybe. Then we went off to Dragonstone, where Jon Snow Snow got to show some pretty average finger paintings to convince Daenerys that they're all on team fight.
Yeah,
the
what
White
I thought
Walkers.
was good about that is he managed to hide that crayon that was in his pocket pretty well.
Is that a crayon in your
Yeah,
pocket, Jon Snow?
Come
or
in,
are you
check
just
out
being
these
specific?
drawings that I've just conveniently found, which maybe convince you that I'm telling you the truth. In no way did I draw these myself, even though they look like they could have been drawn by anybody.
Anybody over the age of 3.
I think it was when we were watching it. Was it you, Jason, who pointed out that the spiral patterns match the
Yeah.
symbols
And
of the White Walkers
that came
corpses
up.
in?
That specifically came up again. Well, I watched a couple of recaps and they mentioned it there. But you go back to the first season and it comes up a few times, like the in the first episode.
Yeah, and end of the last episode has it as well.
And then when they're at
Usually
the
the
fist,
bookends of
when they're
most
at the
of them.
fist of the first men,
Yeah,
which is when the Night's Watch go north into the wildlands, and they come across the spiral pattern a couple of times, and I think someone made a bit of a comment. I think it was one of the Night's Watch in the first epised. They're ever the artists, aren't they? These guys or something like that. It might not have been that episode, but they were talking about it something specifically. I think it was the wild folk were saying ever the artists or something like that.
yeah, it's interesting.
But
I liked that.
as to what the significance of these patterns are, who knows? Who knows at the moment?
Maybe nothing. Maybe they'll never talk. Maybe it's just like a little detail there that you might see.
They're just a bit OCD about how they lay their body
I
parts
don't know
out.
if they have enough time in the remaining 6 full-length feature films to go into the depth of the artistry of the White Walkers.
I'm starting to notice places in earlier episodes now that I'm rewatching them where you know what, this storyline didn't even need to be here, did it? And they could have just cut this chunk out. And
Yeah,
cut that chunk
I think
out.
that, but they didn't know where they were going necessarily. They were just hoping to get to the Red Wedding, and they weren't aware of which bits they would and wouldn't be.
Like for example,
keeping
they're,
the
they're
adaptation.
developing the storyline. Hang on, was that in this episode or the last one? The Grey Worm and Missandra.
Mm-hmm.
Developing that storyline, you know, them falling in love and all this kind of thing. And I'm thinking, you know what? Do we really need to develop more love stories? We've only got 6 full-length feature films to go through. We've got to
I assume
get this stuff ticking.
And I
But there
could
could be something significant down the line, yeah.
Earlier on in the story, when Daenerys is getting her future read by, I think it's Karth.
Yeah.
No, Quaid. The woman in Karth who has the mask, whose name I can't remember.
Yeah,
Quaid
that's
the Shadow.
right.
She says you will know 3 betrayals, and Daenerys has only thus far known 2. I think the third one will be Missandei, and it'll be something about Grey
So
Worm.
the first betrayal was in Karth,
One was Jorah.
and one was Jorah, which
Prior
was later.
to.
But there was one in Karth where her handmaiden betrayed
Yep.
her to the dude
Yep.
there and they
And then
grabbed the dragons.
to the best of my knowledge, there has been no other betrayals. So the
Okay.
last betrayal remains, and I think the reason they're trying to show Missandei's loyalties to Grey Worm as being very important is because Missandei is going to do something to save Grey Worm from some fate
Okay,
that will
that's
ultimately betray
interesting.
Daenerys.
Otherwise,
that scene is fucking annoying.
was
right.
that in the book that you're talking about?
None
The
of this is
three,
in the book. Oh yeah, the 3. Yeah, you want to know 3 betrayals? Yes, it's from
so
the
it
book as
wasn't
well.
mentioned because I don't think it was mentioned in the actual TV series.
There might be a different arc, perhaps, and we've seen previews of episode 5 where Daenerys insists that the remnants of the Lannister army that they defeat bend the knee or die, and
Yeah.
perhaps Missandra doesn't take too kindly to that scenario.
Do you know what's interesting about
I
that?
don't-
Well,
I'm
what
not
I
sure
find
she'd
interesting-
care about that particular one.
Well,
The-
she's the breaker of chains, and that's sort of putting chains back on.
in the first Fields of Fire, where the original ruling house of the Reach, the Gardeners, was defeated and the Tyrells put in power, was after one of the Targaryens offered the same thing to the Tyrell army, and they burned the.
Well, yeah, and then the Lannisters
burned
joined
the-
it.
they
That's
burned
right.
the
because
Gardeners
there was an original battle called the Field of Fire or something.
yeah, and then this is the Field of Fire 2,
yeah.
and the outcome for House Tyrell
Electric
/ the Reach
Boogaloo.
is the same. You've been defeated. You're offered an opportunity to come across. I'm wondering if the Tarleys will live through the episode.
Oh, right. Well, we don't even know what happened to Dickon. Hang on. No,
Whoa! You got his name right,
jumping
Jason.
ahead. Yeah, I know. He deserves to get his name right.
We're jumping ahead. Let's slow down this dragon.
Slow our roll. So there was some. We went to the cave where there was the dragon glass in the
then
cave.
they came out, and we had Team Loser reports from Varys and Tyrion talking about, hey,
I
we
like
took
how they
over-
tag team it though.
Yeah.
They didn't. No one wanted to quite deliver the bad news on their own.
We've all been in those meetings,
Yeah.
haven't we?
I'll deliver a little bit. You deliver a little bit.
we won Castle Rock, but there was no one really there, and Highgarden fell to Team Lannister, and they took all the grain and gold. And then at the last moment, if that was enough bad news, Loser Theon rocks up.
Actually,
his
that
little
was
bit of bad
that
news.
was pretty good scene. That was a pretty good scene. Lose the Theon fully up, turning up, and you're going, oh, that's right. These two haven't seen each other, and there's been a lot of shit gone under the bridge since then. And I did like his Theon stood there and goes, John? It's kind of trying to sound vaguely upbeat.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm not sure John knows Bran's alive.
He doesn't at this
No,
point.
he doesn't.
Doesn't at this point.
Bran saw John at Craster's Keep in the TV show, not in the books. And
Actually, it's fairly common knowledge that Theon hadn't killed the two. That knowledge had come out because I've been watching the episodes where it happened. That Theon didn't kill the Bran children.
it's common knowledge to the Boltons.
Common knowledge to Bolton. It was knowledge that was out there. It wasn't. It hasn't been totally. It was
Yeah.
one stage it was just Theon and his probably the couple of guys he was there with. But it's kind of out there, and I seem to remember it getting through to someone else, like Sansa found out as well, or something like that.
Okay.
But
I'm just wondering
So
if
maybe-
John's reaction would be
well,
different
actually,
if he
so if
realised.
Sansa knows, then
I mean, to be fair, Theon still murdered 2 children and hung their bodies
Absolutely.
up outside a castle. Not a good act.
absolutely. But as with most people, unless it directly affects you, it's not always the biggest issue.
So with this delivery of bad news, we move to the scene of unconvincing reflections where Daenerys suggests she's sick of these silly games
That's fair
and
enough.
wants retribution, very unconvincingly. And then she asks Jon Snow for counsel, who very much unconvincingly gives a speech about if you
I
burn
liked
people...
his
that
speech with it being more
I
of
thought
the
that
same.
worked.
I
I
just-
thought it worked. I thought it worked. If you go in there and you melt the towers and burn down the city and everything, then you just more of the
The
same.
message was right, the delivery was crap. I find
Okay.
them-
Well, yeah, those two aren't two strongest in deliveries at all. Between Amelia Clark and
Kit Harington. I think Kit is just not given the best material.
And maybe it's the same with Amelia. I mean, she's meant to act imperious and shit, and she just seems to get locked in that mode a little bit. That's all.
Yeah.
But as far as the character goes, getting sick of namby pamming about and trying to do anything when she goes, I've got dragons. Let's do the power move.
Yeah. When she plays the role of caring, soft, do-gooder, it's sort of believable. When she tries to be the aggressive hard ass, not so much. She gets way outclassed by Sansa and Cersei in those sort of portrayals.
I think it's the actress, though, because in Terminator, whatever the fuck the recent one was called, Salvation... But anyway, the one that she's in playing Sarah Connor, she's not good at that role either.
Yeah. I did see it.
Whereas, like, Linda Hamilton was fucking amazing.
And Lena Headey was...
Yeah, and Lena Headey, when she played it in Sarah Connor,
Was pretty good, yeah.
also good. Amelia Clark, really
I haven't seen
kind
the
of
full
ordinary.
Amelia Clark, but I did watch a YouTube video where they were talking about roles that people wish they hadn't rebooted with different actors.
Yeah.
And one of them mentioned was the Amelia Clark one.
So that all wraps up when we move to The Rose Road, my favourite card in the Game of Thrones living card game, but that's a side issue, where we see the return of one of our favourite characters of the whole series, Bronn. Bronn,
Yeah.
bitching that he's not getting paid.
I did like Jamie's line as well. Here he is, typical Bronn, saddlebags full of gold, complaining he's not getting paid.
Bronn has...
However, he has been eyeing a castle off for a long time. He's been angling for it.
But
Why not that one that's quite currently empty?
Because there'll be a revolution and there's no food. Jamie gave him good advice. Bronn has he's a fan favourite, and he's been treated now like he's a fan favourite. It kind of annoyed me how impervious to damage he was.
Yes, I didn't believe it was within character for him to go searching for that secret arrow weapon. I thought that was
Yeah.
totally out of character for Bronn. And even saving Jamie, which he sort of had ho-hum allegiances
I think
to.
the thing about saving Jamie is if you let Jamie die, you're definitely getting nothing. If you save Jamie, you're probably not getting that castle he's promised you, but you're getting more of that castle than
But Bronn's
not.
typically calculating about how much of his own skin he puts on the line to say
Yeah.
something. Jamie idiotically running into Dragon's Flames doesn't suggest... In my experience with watching the show, Bronn wouldn't get that close. He would have tried to stop Jamie a little bit before that happened.
When it became obvious that Tyrion could have a trial by combat against the Mountain, Bronn was not willing to fight the Mountain.
Exactly.
I
And the
literally just
Mountain is
watched.
smaller than a dragon, I would like to point out.
Did literally just watch that episode today, and he goes, "Look, he's awful big, he's awful strong, and he's a lot faster for a big fella than you might think. I might be able to kill him." But he wasn't sure, and he was you're right. He is much more calculating, and the fact that when I would have almost thought once dragons came on the scene, Bronn would have went, "I'm out," and just dealt and left kind of thing. But you're right. It was almost entirely out of character for him to actually go to all the trouble of
Yeah, look, I get it. I'm a Bronn fan. I liked watching it, but in the back of my mind, it was like, this is fan service. And
I wouldn't think any
it's a bit
less of him for
ridiculous.
him just bailing on the battle. I would think that's Bronn. That's the Bronn I love.
Yeah.
That is the Bronn we love.
Yeah.
He's
Well,
not
I
the
mean,
hero.
the good news is when Daenerys offers people the chance to turn over and change sides, Bronn will probably be like,
Yeah.
yeah, right. I want a castle.
Yeah.
He promised me a castle. If you can get me a castle,
There's one over there. We just came out of it. I'm down with it. Absolutely. And
we met Dickon.
Dickon.
the other thing that happened in that scene is Daenerys burnt all the food.
Yeah, but hang on.
She
Dickon.
went out of her way to burn the food as well. Like she came in, burned a line in the Lannister army. Then the very next thing she attacked was a wagon, followed by every other wagon that was available before returning to military targets.
Yeah, I was looking at that on one of the, I think, one of the 2 or 3 times I rewatched this episode, and particularly that scene. You had all the troops lined out, arrayed out in quite a thin line. And by the time she was coming down, they had the thin line, and directly behind them in most scenes were the wagons and a few reserve troops and things like that, but just the wagons mainly. She couldn't go down and burn the lines because at that point, you could see it, the Dothraki were totally engaged with the lines, but just burning behind them. I mean, admittedly, targeting the food seemed a little bit weird. Seemed a little bit lacking in forethought.
You got to remember, in the scene immediately prior to, Tyrion points out that you don't have enough food to feed the Dothraki if you take him across to Westeros. Well, I think it's Tyrion. Someone points it out.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
then
it was
she's
a little
like,
bit odd.
food? I'm going to burn it.
Burn all of it. But the image of like Bronn obviously detecting the army, the oncoming army first, as Bronn would, and
As opposed to, I don't know, scouts or outriders that happen to be
yeah,
out
we had
there.
this discussion. I found
it happens a lot in Game of Thrones.
Yeah. I found the idea of a massively mobile cavalry force, like more mobile than any of their cavalry because they're armored cavalry and stuff, just coming on to an army on the march quite suddenly. I didn't find it unbelievable.
All you have to do is have someone blow a war horn or some sort of trumpet.
There might have been scouts out there, but the Dothraki might have already got them. I mean,
Yeah, look,
it's entirely
the
possible.
point about scouts is...
The Dothraki, this is what they do.
No,
Catching
yeah.
armies in the field is what they do.
No. What they do is they're barbarians on an eastern continent that seeks to be paid off by cities when they show up and threaten to siege it. Taking on an actual army is not something they do on a regular basis. Admittedly, the Lannister forces were quite in disarray. I just found that to be a little bit like a niggling thing. It's like, why does Bronn have to have superpowers again? Why can't you just have someone blow a horn and Bronn's like, what does that trumpet mean? You can even give Bronn the line. Or maybe Dickon can be like, what's that trumpet? And Bronn be like, you fucking muppet. We're under attack.
Yeah, poor old Dickon.
To a lesser extent, perhaps if Jamie listened to the advice about just doling out some floggings rather than giving fair warning may have helped his cause.
So Frank comes down on the pro-flogging side.
Frank,
Well, you know,
we're getting
they
right
got
wing
decimated.
authoritarian Franco when it comes to
Spare
Game
the
of
rod,
Thrones.
spoil the Lannister army.
Yeah. Look, it wasn't as egregious as the... I mean, the same. We watched War for the Planet of the Apes, and a very similar thing happened in that film where they're following an army all of about 500 meters behind them, and no one sees them.
A modern force of rifled troopers in Humvees and stuff,
And no one's on scout
and
duty.
no one
No one's on
noticed the hairy apes on horses following not that far behind them. Franco and I have been over this.
Yeah, we've done a small bat just to cover that one on
Yeah.
Thursday night,
All right.
We're testing out the Skype capabilities.
and they worked.
So did you do like a BAP live?
Yes.
Did you wear monkey masks?
Well, it wouldn't have mattered because we didn't have any cameras.
Okay.
And we were in the same room.
Yeah.
We did it via Skype, which proves a success. Which, as a douchebag filter invitation, now we can now extend an invitation to our dedicated listeners to call in.
Yes.
We can
We need to.
organise people to call in and give us their thoughts on selected subject matters.
Wait. Like right now, you've got it all rigged up because I don't see any extra cables going into that mixer.
Well, I'm extending the invitation for next week.
So they can't really. They're going to call in not so much on demand. They're going to let us know in advance that they're going to call in, or
Well, technically, no.
Well,
I just need to. Well, yes, I do because I need to know their Skype IDs.
Well, no,
Yeah,
technically,
and how are we gonna listen to it on
technically, we can have it set up so we can be looking on the YouTube chat, and they can just contact you by that. But the other thing, going back to Game of Thrones, the whole battle. I mean, little quibbles aside, as us war history nerds getting worried about whether someone has the appropriate scouts out or not. It was a well-produced battle.
It was a
pretty
lot.
fucking.
Yeah, it was a lot better than the Castle Sieges the week before.
Yeah. Better than Blackwater, I think. Even
I particularly liked the scenes where the Lannister pikemen are being charged by the Dothraki and there's the guy shaking.
Yeah.
I particularly like the way that Jaime called the archers up into their ranks. I'm not sure the archers would have done that. Like after the people have been burned alive by a dragon, and he's like, archers form up. You'd be like, nah.
I've got to admit, those lines held about a lot longer than I expected, considering most of them are getting blasted away by dragonfire. The CG on the dragon was really impressive. The just all the CG around the dragon, you could see where the money was spent, and the way the gliding, the way it would come in, cruise into a certain height, and then
Over
come
the river
down,
as
and then just glide in on a glide path and getting ready, and you could just see everyone going, "Here it comes! It's gonna burn us straight." And the little wake on the lake as it's going along.
That was cool.
Fucking awesome. It was really well.
Even
produced.
the bit where it got shot out of the sky looked right as well.
Yeah.
It sort of doubled over and then started falling. I was like, oh, that's really well done.
It's a bit hurt.
I feel like I'm legitimately watching a dragon.
So what do we think? We think the dragon's out for 2 or 3 weeks?
No.
Is this a minor injury or?
No, couple
Jason, the
cortisone
pace
shots.
they're setting for the show, they're not even going to mention it next episode.
I'm talking about 2 or 3 weeks in. I'm talking game time. He's getting ready for finals. Getting ready for finals football.
Maybe. Look, I can't tell how much time's passing because Tyrion was on Dragonstone with Jon telling him, Daenerys is gone. And then the very next scene, which is somewhere near King's Landing, he just walks up a hill. He's like, "Sup, boys?" And she'd already fucking left. And he was on Dragonstone. He's like, "No, Daenerys has gone." And he's like, "Oh, I'm just going to fucking teleport. I'm just going to borrow Littlefinger's jetpack."
I wish they would explain what are the rules for the teleporter, because Tyrion can use the teleporter, but Jorah the Explorer can't use the teleporter.
Yeah.
Because he was absent from this battle.
Well, actually, Jorah the Explorer must have had access to it because he got over to Old Town pretty fucking quick after they told him to get a cure.
Yeah.
So I think he had access to the
I think
teleporter
the,
briefly.
the point about Jorah being absent, though, is he couldn't possibly know where her army would be.
That's never stopped the show from
No, I know, but
delivering characters
at least they held to that one point.
Yeah.
Like, because he's in Old Town, he wouldn't know her battle plans. He might know that Grey Worm has taken Castle Rock.
I did notice on my rewatch, they do drop a few more lines about time frames casually into conversation every now and then about how long they've been on the road and stuff like that. And like Jaime was in chains basically almost a year under Robb Stark and things like that. So they definitely do drop a few little Easter eggs as to what sort of time frames are going past. Doesn't explain everything, of course, but
Yeah, I just little bits like that would be nice. And you don't have to do it all the time.
well,
Moving on.
a solid 5 out of 5, I think, episode for me.
Yeah, it was
had,
good.
Had everything in it I
was
wanted.
good.
Comparatively to the first 4, yeah, definitely. Sorry, to the first 3, it's definitely up there.
Yeah, well, obviously this is where the money went, so that was good.
Can't wait for next week.
Tomorrow night, you mean?
Other news, for the real high-level nerds out there, there's an update to Twilight Imperium.
Yeah, I'm pretty happy about that.
Do we know what the update is? I read the link
do.
you sent, and it was just like
There
the
was
marketing
more-
spiel for
There was more
what
on
the
Reddit.
game.
Yeah. So there's a Reddit subreddit called Twilight Imperium, which I obviously subscribe to.
So before you get into it, for those who are unaware, Twilight Imperium is a massive nerd game that generally takes about 12 hours to play.
It's like a whole day.
Yeah,
It's a whole day of nerd gaming. So the new 4th edition of TI, it's back to being 6 players like the core sets always are, so we can't have too big a game. And then they've just changed the way certain things work. So there's a politics phase that follows on from the normal, strategic phase. I don't want to bore people who don't understand TI too much, but they're separating it out so that you
It's okay,
have
there's
access
no
to all
one
your
listening.
resources. Politics is its own phase dedicated. I don't think you send like your little advisors anymore, and agendas are played off the top of the deck. They've changed the way that the research trees work. So now, when you research technology, your race sheet's different. It has all your different ships and all the different stats on it. And when you get text, you put them over the top of various ships, so you can research and improve specific units.
Oh, okay. That's cool.
That's cool. Yeah, they've changed.
I like the politics change, to be honest, because I always thought it didn't really fit in the standard.
Well, that was the thing, because you could
cycle.
wait till people had spent themselves out and then push through laws.
It just seemed like such an afterthought in most ways, and it was hard to play to I guess you could specifically play to it if you wanted to. I didn't like the way it was being executed in the game currently.
Well,
So the
different now.
change may be good, yeah.
And the other thing that I can remember off the top of my head they changed is the way that the victory point strategy cards work. So there's, I think it's the number 8 strategy card called Imperium. And if you take that, you get a victory point if you control Mercatile Rex, and you can claim any currently visible objective, or you can draw a new secret objective, like an additional one. So you can get as many secret objectives as you want. And they've changed the way those are. So now they're like things like, conquer a system on the border between you and someone else, or engage this, or do whatever. Oh, and they've changed trade too.
So if they evened out the secret objectives, because I found that sometimes one person will get something that was just totally unachievable.
Yes,
in
they're a
comparison.
lot smaller.
Yeah.
And sort of more little piecemeal. So that now that you can, increase your territory, or you can engage in a warfare thing, or you can improve your trade lines. And yeah, they've reformed trade as well. So now you get a certain amount of trade goods, and you can exchange them with other people, and they get trade goods in exchange for your commodities. But all of that looked interesting. I'm looking forward to seeing what goes on.
New races?
They said there were 17 in the core set. Awesome. Which I think is all of the current
guess
ones.
they might be the same races, just tweaked or something like that. Something.
I remember when we would play a 6-player game, there wasn't enough to give everyone 3. We were short, which would be 18. So 17 must be kind of the number we'll be looking at. Either way, that's a bit exciting. They also announced a Fallout board game as well, Fantasy Flight, at Gen Con, publishing all their new stuff. So
I sent that YouTube video, that link through to you guys of Shut Up and Sit Down doing a review of a Indiana Jones style one. I just like the look of it. It was an interesting game. It was a cooperative game, very low skills. Very low skill set required, not a huge number of rules. But the interesting thing was you had a CD player, or you could have it's only a 10-minute game length, so you could have an app on your phone or something, and it's got a few things that trigger during the 10-minute playtime. But there's no taking turns. You've all got your own dice, and you're all rolling those dice as fast as you can, and just keep rolling. And someone will call out they're locked, and you got to go and help them, or try and go over and try to help them to get them out of a place or something. But it was just throwing dice. Dexterity actually came into it as to how quickly you could throw dice.
Right.
It looked kind of interesting as a quick sort of fun game. But yeah.
No.
And highly rated by the Shut Up and Sit Down guys, which I quite like.
I quite like this stuff too.
Yeah.
In throwback douchebag news, I watched Escape from New York, John Carpenter's 1981 New York dystopia film. And
Wow.
enjoyed it thoroughly.
Yeah,
Loved
it's a
that
shame
movie.
they made a sequel to that, because Escape from LA not as good.
In my world, that sequel doesn't exist.
Yeah.
It is.
The original's fantastic.
It is. It's some aspects are a little dated, but obviously with today's modern high definition TVs, it's very obvious what was sort of little models and stuff like that. Unfortunately, I think you really need to watch it on the old CRT TVs to enjoy it, where it hides a lot of that detail.
Maybe, but you got to remember that big screens in cinemas were quite large.
Yeah, but they didn't have the detail.
Yeah, no, the clarity wasn't there, but
So you need that little bit of blurriness to bring in a little bit more of the believability. But great movie, the classic 80s anti-hero of Snake Plissken.
yeah.
How did Dowie get that nickname? How did our mutual friend Dowie get that nickname, Snake? It was in the emails you guys were sending around. Snake.
I think that was just me being Metal Gear Solid quotey.
Okay.
And they throw the oft quoted line was, "I thought you were dead."
Yeah.
Keeps on getting rolled out, but it's got Isaac Hayes, the
Yep.
famous singer, in it as the main bad guy, the Duke. Ernest Borgnine. as
Ernest
the
Borgnine, that's right, as a
taxi
cab driver, yeah.
Some great dystopian piece by John Carpenter.
Whatever. I mean, the 80s were big on casting musicians in films. Whatever happened to that?
That still happens.
Sting was in June. Bowie was in Labyrinth. There are others.
Modern Day Training Day had a lot of R&B hip hop stars in it.
Okay.
Macy
Training
Gray,
Day?
Yeah.
I remember Macy Gray, actually. Yeah, that's
Macy
right.
Gray, Snoop Dogg.
Training Day's a good movie.
It's awesome.
You watched that because of Denzel recently, didn't you? The Denzel podcast.
Not specifically.
I did. I listened
it
to
comes
the
up often enough on free air that you can just tune into
But
it.
I listened to the podcast, the Denzel is the greatest actor of all time podcast, and they had their Training Day one, and it's a good movie. It's a good movie. There's a lot of Denzelishness in that one.
Any other douchebaggery news?
No, that's quite a long douchebag.
It was. We had a lot to talk about. It's almost becoming the
mainstay of the
zeitgeist
show.
BAP rather than the politics BAP. What have we got for the newsies, boys?
I haven't got terribly much at all.
Well, the big one for me was the marriage equality plebiscite. Postal plebiscite, I should say.
Yes, which is now... the Senate knocked back the plebiscite, so now it's a postal vote.
Unsurprisingly, the Senate knocked back, for the second time,
Yes.
the plebiscite option, and now it's going to the post,
Apparently,
which is a little odd.
this is your opportunity to say no to political correctness, Dean.
That's what Tony is saying, yeah.
Which makes no sense, but often Tony doesn't make any sense.
You know what's interesting about that, and this is not where my notes start, but I'm just going to jump in. Tony was the opponent for the Republican plebiscite as well, referendum as well, championed the no cause, and Malcolm was his opponent with the yes cause. Malcolm is gun shy on this. He doesn't want to be involved. He says he's going to vote yes, but he's not going to be the champion for the left cause, whereas Tony is strapping on his armour and wading into the fray. I actually think this is kind of win-win for Tony, because he looks like the bastion of conservative leadership, a strong, reliable guy that's going to stand up and fight for what you want, and Malcolm is just a shrinking varlet in the corner.
It's all going to go remarkably well for him until they figure out that he's a dual citizen and has to resign.
Well, he renounced his a while ago. He published that.
Did he actually publish it?
Yeah, a couple of weeks or months ago, he's released the forms.
No, I thought that was because there was apparently there was no publication of anything, and they couldn't get corroborating evidence from the UK either.
Certain Tony released.
He has. He did. It's been clarified. Tony Abbott is not a citizen of the UK. It's been sorted.
Okay.
Released it on Twitter.
However,
recently.
Yeah.
It was semi recently.
Yeah.
It was like a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
Since the whole Malcolm Roberts and
since everyone else was getting booted out of Parliament for the same reason.
Well, they resigned from Parliament. No one's been technically booted out of Parliament yet. They've all gone on their own, except for Malcolm Day. They've all gone on their own reconnaissance.
Yeah. I mean, Matt Carnarvon hasn't gone yet.
No, he resigned from
his cabinet position,
but he's still in Parliament. I think he said he's not going to vote on anything until it's resolved.
Yeah.
Whereas Malcolm Day said he's still going to vote. He doesn't care.
I wouldn't have an awful lot of an issue with Scott and...
I think it's a silly rule. And the only reason I'd be pissed off about the Liberal, those other members voting, is because our two people that I actually liked decided to leave rather than I didn't actually have a problem. The rules, it's a stupid rule. I mean,
Scott Ludlam and Larissa Waters could have stayed until the High Court said you've got to go.
Yeah, but the rules were pretty clear, and they decided to leave. But I don't really fault them for that or anything like that. It's a stupid rule, and it's stupid.
I don't think it's necessarily stupid that you should only have one citizenship, but perhaps the execution could be a bit better. Like, oh well, it's clear now you either renounce it, you got 2 weeks to renounce it, or you leave Parliament.
Well,
maybe a softer.
It's a bit stupid though, because Scott Ludlam was a New Zealand citizen. The head of state for New Zealand is the Queen of England. And he is loyal.
Our head of state
if he's got a problem with loyalty, he's loyal to the head of state of New Zealand, who's the Queen of England, or the head of state of Australia, who is the Queen of England.
Our head of state isn't even Australian.
Larissa Waters, Canada, same story.
Yeah.
Anyone, Malcolm Roberts is England, same fucking story, really.
I mean, I know they don't like these kind of things when it comes down to legal questions, but some common sense just needs to fucking prevail here.
Yeah. You're still loyal to the Queen.
Yeah.
We good.
Well, yes, we realise that you left Canada when you were 3, and you were only there because your parents were studying abroad at the time or something like that. It's literally, they have no ties almost at all to the other country, and it's just a bit stupid. Anyway, the plebiscite.
Well, so the interesting things about the plebiscite, I'm interesting in quotation fingers, it's being run by the Australian Bureau of Statistics, not the Australian Electoral Commission. It's been titled the Australian Marriage Law Postal Survey.
So it's a poll.
Pretty much. Because the ABS has jurisdiction to take polls, which they already have done on marriage equality in Australia, and it's more than 70% support. But this is a poll of everyone individually. It's voluntary.
No, it's a poll of everyone who checks their mail.
Well, that's the thing. It goes to everyone at their
postal address.
But there are certain people on the electoral roll, silent electors, whose addresses the AEC cannot release. This includes every politician in Australia.
Oh, so the pollies don't get to vote.
So the pollies may not get to vote. It also includes people who are celebrities or who otherwise don't want to show up and have someone randomly go, "Oh my God, Toadfish, you live around the corner from me."
Toadfish.
Is that your go-to famous person? Wow.
Oh, come on. I mean, if you met a famous person you want to hang out with.
Well, I mean, of all Australian sort of soap opera stars and stuff, Toadfish is possibly the best known name.
Yeah.
Mainly because of the fact that it's Toadfish.
Wouldn't you want to have a beer with Toady?
I don't know. I haven't seen that show in a long, long time.
Yeah.
Well, nor have I. He's
I
probably,
may not want to have a beer with Toady at all.
he might still be. He might be like the Alf Stewart of Neighbours these days. I don't know. I don't even know how old Toady is. So because it's being run by the ABS and not the AEC, the government has to release funds to the tune of $122 million to the ABS to run this plebiscite, which certain senators are taking issue with because they're not allowed to release funds for the purposes of undertaking electoral tasks, nor is the ABS supposed to do that. So they're taking that to the High Court.
Yeah.
But interestingly enough, the other thing about the fact that it's a voluntary postal poll means that the papers get sent to your address on the electoral roll without any other identifying information. So if you get someone else's papers and fill them out and send them back, it will be counted as a vote. There is no one within the ABS who does voter fraud.
Just as well, this vote in no way binds anyone to do anything.
Yeah, and the other interesting thing is because it's being carried out by the ABS, not the AEC, all of the laws that apply to the standards for campaigning are not in effect either.
And I am right. This is a postal poll that's asking us whether we want the Parliament to do its fucking job and make a vote.
No. This is a postal poll on whether the Liberal Party should take a motion to Parliament. It's not even about marriage equality. It's like, should the Liberal Party
just do your fucking jobs. We don't need to take a vote on whether you do your jobs.
Well, we are. Well, we maybe are. And the other interesting thing is Malcolm's come out and said that if this gets struck down in the High Court, there will be no poll. This is your only option. So the Liberal Party nearly self-destructed over the winter break because people are going to go rogue and try and push this through to get to a point where basically the situation remains unchanged and they're just going to go ahead with the standard plan of a poll. And if that doesn't come off, then there'll be nothing until the next election. And that's it. Warren Ench did say that he doesn't imagine this plebiscite
I don't think it's going to
policy will
amount to
stick.
anything. I don't think it's going to amount to anything.
I wouldn't be surprised if the High Court strikes it down or forces them to go to the Senate to see if the Senate will allow them to release the funds, which will then get struck down.
I mean, even if they do allow it to go through, I do not think the postal poll is going to amount to anything. It's I don't know. It just seems like too much of a load of shit that it's designed to accomplish nothing. You know what I mean?
It is. I mean, it seems very much designed to allow a very vocal minority who I'm referring to Christian fundamentalists, I guess, because there are plenty of Christians in Australia that don't have an issue with same-sex marriage. But there are those who are of the more devout faiths who really want to have a say in this, and I'm not sure why. But, I've been speaking to people on the internet, my friends who are religious.
Internet people.
And they basically, they're concerned because this is, for thousands of years has been taught as being a sin, homosexuality, not marriage.
But it's not their sin.
No, I know. And to the point, it's not going to stop them from sinning either. Like if you're like, oh, you can't get married. Okay, we're going to fucking sin, which is another sin. We'll double sin. But look, it's interesting. It's interesting. But I feel like this is an issue which could just as easily be divisive.
I mean, you've been talking to these
and push people away from religion.
Because I've heard quite a few. Well, I've heard the very limited arguments that come up against it. Was there anything new? Any new arguments?
No,
It was the same old retreaded stuff.
I was curious. I asked for, basically their opinion and why they held the position, why they even cared what two people who are in love do, who want to. And the basic thing they come down with was that it's the use of the word marriage. They don't mind if, in fact, they support the concept of equal rights for Australians and under the eyes of the law, but that marriage itself, for them, carries a meaning based on its definition in the Bible. And they don't want to see that
Which
word
Bible?
used. I don't know, whichever one they read.
We probably should have asked them which Bible. I mean, because there's a bunch of Bibles.
It's pretty much...
If they're worried about the definition of the word marriage, and they seem to be drawing that definition from multiple different sources, no one can really nail down which source you're allowed to use. Could be the King James. I don't know. Could be the
I
Quran.
suspect it's probably KJV.
Is the Quran version of the Bible? Is that?
It's not. It's the different books. The different books.
No, but what I mean is the Quran version of marriage. Is that acceptable to them? No, possibly.
Don't know.
It's probably a slightly different definition. It's just.
All the
I'm trying to
Abrahamic religions share pretty similar definitions. Of
I'm
this stuff.
trying to reduce it to the absurd. I'm just not interested,
Well,
really.
generally the arguments were absurd because I have to step in here because I was actually going to award Dean the inaugural BAP award for diplomacy and restraint on a public on public debating on a digital medium because I actually saw the conversation from the scene.
It went on for hours.
It went on for quite some time.
Was this on Facebook or something?
On Friday night, yeah, on Facebook.
And Dean did a stupendous job on, in a respectful manner, challenging some of the viewpoints and their arguments on the matter of same-sex marriage. And I found that, obviously, I was seeing what you were trying to do. You were trying to extend out the debate and tease it out because a lot of it made no sense. They were coming. You know, you're never going to get a rational argument from people that believe in an imaginary friend in a book that's allegedly the spoken word of the imaginary friend.
There's no point trying to
rationalize.
point trying to rationalize someone out of a position that they were never rationalized into.
Because the main problem
you remember, you're not going to win anyone over on the internet anyway.
No.
No,
All
but,
you're going to do
but
is
I mean,
influence
forget
other people
about the
reading
internet. If they haven't arrived at their position through rational means, rationalizing them out of it is not really.
Well, you can't because Dean's
not really something you
Dean's
can accomplish.
argument was, how does what two individuals do consentingly to with how does that affect you? And the answer is it doesn't. So their fallback was, but this book says it's wrong.
Yeah.
Wow. Let's have a look at what that book's saying, who wrote it, whatever it is, because they're saying it's the spoken word of God or his associate. No, it's not. It was actually written, quite some time after the alleged person was alleged to have said such things.
My biblical knowledge is not where it needs to
but
be.
it doesn't even.
The argument for scripture.
It doesn't need to be anywhere though.
No,
it's a made-up book.
The majority of the references people will give you for why homosexuality is bad from the Bible all come from the Old Testament, which is the law of Moses, which was superseded by Big J when he showed up anyway.
Yeah,
there's plenty of stuff in the Old Testament.
But I mean,
which is
I used to be an avid sort of anti-theist, and then when I realised, Jesus, there's no point arguing when the basis of their argument always comes down to, as you pointed out, a book that was written by a man, and it's a work of fucking fiction. So
no, it's interesting. It's always important to understand people's perspectives.
I understand,
I have
but
a number of religious
the
friends.
perspective came back to the same thing. It came back to that book.
This is different because I have a number of religious friends who are pro-gay marriage, and I have a very small number who are.
Do they have a basis in their book for why they're pro-marriage?
I haven't asked. I will ask.
Because I mean, maybe they're ignoring the book. Because I know religious people that ignore the book and they're quite happy to be religious and spiritual.
Well, there's
but
plenty
they just simply don't take anything literal from the book.
There's plenty of stuff in the book though that basically says, "Let God be the judge. It's not for you to do it," and also love thy brother. Right? And at the end of the day, if you're just nice to people and respectful, it costs you nothing. And you don't have to. You may make their day. It doesn't matter. You can just be a nice person.
No. But I mean,
and that's what Jesus was about, allegedly.
But what I mean is the reason I stopped having these discussions because the ones that were strident against gay marriage or something similar. I can't remember. There's a few different cause celeb, anti-abortion, that kind of thing. The ones that were strident against it all came back to the one point. The book as a reference. That was because you could rationalize anything else like it's not going to affect you. Why are you against gay marriage? Why does it matter to you? Blah blah blah. Because this is a good example because it really doesn't matter to anyone else except they'd always come back to this one point and it would be the book.
Well, that's one fallback position.
What other fallback positions do they have?
This is the way it's always been. Is the other fallback? Why do we have to change? Well, you're not really.
But you're not changing. That's what I mean. That's not a rational
position. There's assumption that by allowing some other people
so
to do something that doesn't affect me, somehow my world's changing.
I stopped having that discussion because it always came back to the same issue.
Well, yeah,
you can keep debating with them, but as you pointed out, they're coming back to the same point.
The thing is, it's not about debating. For me, it's about understanding their position. I don't ever think I'll change his mind.
No.
And he knows he's never going to change my mind.
What your understanding their position is different after that conversation? Or did you not already think that they were drawing that?
No, see, because this is someone I used to work with for a long time. Actually, I think you both have worked with.
So perhaps on the individual level, you're drawing up a different perspective from them, but as a whole, when you're talking about the overall argument,
I mean, I always knew that he was very religious. I know he's done missionary work in the past. He's one of the nicest guys you're ever going to meet. He just happens to hold these views, which I find
the one person
I didn't actually know he was. Well, I don't want to mention the name on.
I don't want to mention the name as well, but I do remember someone coming up, and this was the only time I got genuinely shocked by someone who I knew and respected.
It's not our friend, the astrologer.
Astronomer.
Astronomer.
Okay, because what it came up to, and this is what genuinely surprised me because I didn't expect to hear it from someone like him. It was like, okay, we can give them marriage, but next they'll want to adopt children.
Yeah, no, there was
They
a
will want
lot
to
of,
adopt children, and I went, oh well, I'm getting out
There
of
was
this
a-
conversation.
there was some of that being said by other people in the thread, not by my friend, but I just find it interesting because, like I said, he's one of the nice guys I know. He does missionary work. He looks after people. He goes out of his way to be a genuinely decent person. However, he holds this one viewpoint which I didn't expect him to hold. So I wanted to understand why.
But he didn't have a particularly novel reason why. It came back to us.
It was a
very similar
You'll
reason.
have to go back and have a look at it because I believe we can show you how you can get there. But what was interesting was as Dean was trying to get to the nuts and bolts of why he felt this way, the weaker his position for me, maybe because I'm just have no skin in this game. To me, it looked like a weak argument.
I
from
have no
his
skin in the game
presentation.
either. I thought it was interesting because he brought up a couple of points about the strongest argument against it is the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, which is from the Old Testament. And as soon as someone brings up the Old Testament, I will immediately go to the passages like Samuel 15,
Yeah, but I mean,
where God advocates genocide
But
against
you're
the
already
Amalekites.
arguing from it's a ridiculous
No,
place
but-
to start
But
arguing
if
from.
you're going to debate people who held these strong religious beliefs, you've got to go, okay, I accept that. I'm not going to get it to a rational
Yeah,
point. But it
they've
is
got-
interesting to see, all right, why
Okay.
are they hold...
I guess. Sorry,
hold
I
these
guess.
views?
I guess the position I have is through having these discussions so many times in the
Yeah.
past, and then suddenly realizing, you know what, I'm having the same discussion because when you got down
Well,
to
this
the core
wasn't
of
the
it,
same discussion because he admitted that there were bits to the Bible which he doesn't understand.
no, this
He
is
was
the
like-
same discussion. It's
He's
the
like,
same discussion.
You bring up these stories where about where God's advocating genocide, and he's like, yeah, there are bits that I find challenging and don't understand.
Yeah,
And it's like, well, that's
inconsistencies in the Bible.
no,
Yes,
but see, that's the starting point, right? So if you're talking to someone about, hey, maybe some parts of this book are a little wacky, if you can start to highlight those bits where you're like, this, I don't believe.
Okay.
I've read their book, and I don't believe that is a benevolent God. At least not in the Old Testament. There is nothing about him that is he's jealous and petty. And I think that
I'm just going to duck for cover in case
No.
lightning strikes.
it's not going to strike.
no.
There are swathes of passages in the Bible that are great, and there are so many people
Yeah.
out there that have religious faith that do great things. But if I was going to edit that book, I would not put the Old Testament in there at all. And if I was going to put it in there, it wouldn't be the fucking start of the book. I don't want people like starting reading What's My God About, hitting those passages first, because that stuff, there is some stuff in there that is just not. It shouldn't be in a book that modern day humans are reading and basing their philosophies on. A lot of the other stuff that comes later, after the law of Moses ends and Jesus is advocating for, being nice to your fellow man, that stuff's mostly fine.
Mostly.
There's a bit where he has an argument with a fig tree and then curses it to be infertile forever. That's a little weird.
But the point I'm
haven't had the
getting at,
argument with fruit
at
trees.
is the argument you're having there is the argument I remember the discussion and argument I remember having with numerous religious people in the past.
But-
it just hasn't changed.
But you're
Well,
having a
I'm
discussion.
not even having an
I
argument.
understand that you had a revelation about a specific person you knew and go, oh, hang on, you do believe that kind of thing. I understand that, but it's not a new argument. It's one reason why I stopped having that argument because of like, we always get
what's
down
your
to the same
objective?
thing.
In your case, it sounds like you wanted to change
You
their
want to
position on
convert someone.
something,
I don't
as
want to convert
opposed to
anyone.
a debate where you want to understand why they think a certain way with no intention of
No.
changing their
It
view.
started off, I wanted to understand why they thought that way, and 9 times out of 10, it came back to that same issue as well. When you stripped away their arguments, when you stripped away, peeled it away, it came down to a belief in a book, and that book was the guide for guiding certain parts of their life.
Yeah.
And you could point out inconsistencies and ridiculous and absurdities within the book. It didn't really matter because they had a level of faith
Well, no.
as for one thing. That's why they call it faith. It doesn't have to be rationalized.
You're trying to undermine the basis of their psyche, how they approach life. You're never going to succeed. You cannot just go, that book that you have all your faith in is bad. They just won't believe you.
But what?
Well, I think it's more delicate. I definitely think that you can win people over to appreciate that marriage law needs to change. That's the objective here. It's not. And the other interesting thing was, what I found interesting was that my friend and his friends were all very concerned about the level of blowback they would receive. I've often thought that, hey, this is going to be terrible.
Yeah, that was interesting.
This is going to be terrible for my friends who are homosexuals, who are feeling like their relations being judged. My friends who are devoutly religious and genuinely hold the belief that they're doing the right thing are also equally as scared that people are going to look at them and think they're monsters.
Well,
because they voted against it.
No, because they're advocating why you should vote against it.
Yeah, so for instance, they've cited 2 court cases that were currently in progress where preachers were being taken to court
for
over hate speech. And it's like, that seems a bit of a convoluted examples to cite in this discussion, but yeah, it's like, hold on. So basically, you want people to say no to same-sex marriage because you're worried that hate preachers will be taken to court.
Well, no, they're just, I mean, they're worried about the anti-religious movement within Australia, which, and I can understand why, and the last census showed that Australia is predominantly atheist these days. Not predominantly, but the majority of Australians are atheists, I should say. So I can understand why people who are in a minority, who are advocating that the majority should pick on a different minority, might be worried that one day they'll be on the receiving end of this. Wouldn't it be nice to have a plebiscite? Wouldn't it be nice to have a plebiscite that maybe bans religious weddings?
A plebiscite that bans religious...
Well,
So we're talking slippery slope. They're worried about slippery slope.
We're reforming marriage law. What's to stop us from not reforming it later?
Yeah, by all means.
No, I'm just saying. So it's interesting to see that a lot of this is coming from as much of a position of fear from their end as well.
I know. Their position of fear, though, but so we're proposing a plebiscite to expand a certain group's rights, and they somehow think that's a slippery slope to reducing their own rights.
To be honest, I think they're clutching at straws with those
Absolutely
sort of
clutching at straws. But
because they don't have a rational argument to put forward, so basically they clutch at those sort of straw man.
Yeah, it's an absolute straw man because I mean the plebiscite we're looking to, as I said, expand some groups' rights,
and like I said,
and in no way affect another group's rights. And they seem to connect that with the fact that hey, maybe someday in the future we might vote to restrict someone's rights. Well, they're the ones that are trying to keep someone else's rights restricted now.
I understand that, but you shouldn't ever just discard someone's feelings. When they say, this is how I'm feeling, most of the time when someone says that, that is honestly how they're feeling.
This is why Dean gets the award and you don't.
I won't get the award on that.
Because both you and I will get too angry in that thread. That's why I didn't.
Well, no, but I mean,
all I'm saying is
I don't have any skin in the game. Like, I'm not a gay man. I'm not being denied the right to marry someone I love. And I'm not a religious man that's feeling like people are trying to marginalize me. I'm just in the middle, interested about how both sides feel. I would much prefer that my friends who are gay have the right to marry whoever they want, even though I think marriage...
I guess all I was after was I was wondering if there was some new and novel argument that they had, and there isn't.
No, I just wanted to understand their position. I mean, their book's thousands of years old, Jason. Their argument's not going to change.
That was the point I was trying to make. I haven't heard any different arguments. In fact, the only argument I heard, which was actually a valid argument against gay marriage, was also an argument against all marriages of all kind.
Well, the government should have no business in this.
Exactly. It was like, we should not legislate or attach any legislation to get to marriage of any kind whatsoever, and in which case you can get your civil unions or whatever it is, but no one has that. It's stripped away from everyone. I bet they wouldn't be voting for that.
No, they were in favour of that. They were okay with
stripping marriage away from everyone altogether, making it illegal.
When I pointed out that really this is about equal rights for individuals, so a different option might be that marriage carries with it no financial repercussions, no legal repercussions. You have to have contracts for doing next of kin stuff. They were okay with that. They were like, it's not about the rights issue for us.
They still wanted to be legislated that it could only be a man and a woman, though. They were steadfast on that. It's the word
they wanted. They don't want the word marriage being used.
But the argument, as I said, I said was removing any meaning to that, any legislative meaning at all. Any
legal meaning, yeah.
But they said they still wanted some legal meaning.
No. They want the spiritual religious meaning of marriage to stay.
But they want it still enshrined in law.
I didn't
they were
see
happy.
that.
They wanted their spiritual religious meaning in marriage. I mean, I can find a couple of religions where spiritual religious meaning probably has no attachment to gender whatsoever.
Yeah,
someone else's religion.
I'm not disagreeing, but I have no issue with that either. If someone wants to, amend the law such that whatever, the government doesn't have any business in spiritual unions, and they just have some sort of standard boilerplate contract that, two people admit to splitting their assets, sharing whatever, children's rights, this and that. What happens in divorces? What happens if someone's sick and next of kin? And I that's fine. If that's the path people want to go down, that's fine too.
Okay.
Like I said, I'm not a big proponent of marriage. I think it's an archaic institution that doesn't really apply to modern society. But whatever. If people want to get married, knock yourselves out.
Yeah. Equally, knock yourselves out.
Equally. On all fronts.
I advocate that as well. The government should only be in the business of civil unions and get out of the marriage business.
Yeah. The definition of marriage, I mean, write your own dictionary and you can define it to be anything you want. Which is apparently what the Bible is.
If you write your own dictionary, you could define anything to mean whatever you want. I could define Jason's mean arsehole.
Yeah, if there's no legality attached to it, you're free to do that, Dean.
Yeah, well, I have.
Jason is an asshole.
Kiss my Jason. Yeah. So anyway, I think we've rabbited on
About that more
I
than
feel
enough.
I feel a little bit like it's tough to have that discussion because I am the most pro-religious person in the room apparently, and I am in no way pro-religion. So,
No. I
So
think
if anyone out there is
the
listening,
only
and they
difference
happen to feel
between you
like
and I
I'm
is I come
misrepresented,
at a from a level of ennui as to the whole religious question because I've had this discussion so many times, and I was actually interested. I was probably go and check it out, this Facebook discussion, because I really wanted to see if there was something novel, anything new that they'd done, and it just sounds like it's the same arguments that have been just retreaded again.
And I tell you what,
I
from
mean,
what
but you gotta remember that's the conservative. They're trying to preserve culture the way it was / in their mind is ideal.
They're regressives, yeah.
and it wasn't an easy path for Dean to navigate because he was right in the hornet's nest. Basically, there were no allies of Dean's position, and
Really?
at any moment, there was a potential for people to be triggered by the sort of.
Like me.
Dean had to be very delicate in his comments, and he
Yeah.
did really good job.
And
People getting triggered on the internet, never.
And to be fair,
Would never happen. Not even around
the individual
religion.
I was talking to also was pretty careful with his language.
he moderated
There was
well.
there was one point he said something, and I was like, if I was gay, I'd be highly offended by that. But it was once out of 4 hours of a conversation, and I was like, you know what? If there's one point, that's probably not the end of it, and I probably am equally saying things that maybe would be potentially inflammatory to religious people because I, use their book against them. I didn't make my classic fig tree, Barb.
Didn't use the fig tree one?
No.
Because, Jesus is quite well behaved, except for
He's
for most
mostly well
parts.
behaved. He just loses
Except
his
for that
temper at a
fig
fig
tree.
tree.
Yeah. For no known reason.
Well, and there's the bullwhip and the chair and the kicking people out of the bankers out of the temple.
Well, come on. You think I'm not going to be down with that?
No, I'm down with it. It just
for me,
seems a
that's
little
Jesus at his best.
Classic Jesus.
Yeah.
Jesus kicking the bankers out.
See,
Come on.
Classic Jesus for me is where he's turning water into wine and giving people bread and fish, and he's like, "Let's have a
Yeah, I
party."
don't believe that for a second, but I could believe some asshole getting mad with a bunch of bankers and kicking the counters over. That shit I can believe.
Maybe reciting a psalm or two while he's doing it.
Socialist Jesus. Not magical socialist Jesus, but socialist Jesus I can believe.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Moving on, I think we've really not covered really anything of substance in that whole conversation.
Look,
What do you
I
mean? What
It
do
was
you
interesting
mean?
for me. One last thing I will say: it was good to have a discussion about this topic with someone where I could present my argument in a civil manner, and he could present his in a civil manner. In what I imagine is probably going to be one of the last times that happens leading up to the plebiscite. I have a sneaking suspicion that there will be people on the far right preaching fire and brimstone, and there will be people on the far left preaching, an end to religion, and it's going to inflame on both sides. I don't think this is going to be a pleasant couple of months for the country, but maybe we'll have a nice war with North Korea to distract us.
That was going to be my next topic.
How's that for a segue?
It's beautiful.
Boom!
My segue was going to be that my headline for that was Malcolm beats the drum of war, and it's the same thing I said about a year ago with the Tony Abbott because he was beating the drum of war. But yeah, Malcolm wants
and his cock.
Malcolm was on 3AW saying that if the North Korea does a strike against America, that he's going to enact the ANZUS Treaty.
Yep.
Not that the ANZUS Treaty obliges us to participate in any war, but
He also said we're joined at the hip when it comes to defence.
Isn't that fucked up? It's like any fucking misadventure the Yanks want to get involved with, we're right there with it for the most part.
Yeah. It's more fucked up, though. It was annoying when it was George W. Bush, and he was like, we're
And
going
now
into
it's Donald
Iraq.
Trump, and it's like, really? You want to fucking
And
attach
at the
us to
time,
that
I was
thing?
like, I don't think we should be following him. He's an idiot. Now that Donald Trump's like, we're going to go invade North Korea, I genuinely don't think we should be following him. He's not a smart man.
I bet everyone in North Korea, South Korea, and Japan is going, could you guys just shut the fuck up?
Interestingly enough, my cousin who was living in Seoul doing TEFL has come home.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he's like, things are getting too scary there. His wife has moved home.
oh wow.
I thoroughly agree. You do not know. Someone was saying
He's visited North Korea. He's gone over the border and
someone
which
was
you can't do
saying the
anymore,
best possible reading of this is that Donald Trump is playing a little bit of the Nixon style madman
Yes.
gaming. which is the idea that make them think you're mad enough to do it and they'll back off. And people are just hoping that he's self-aware enough to be doing that. But instead, the other option is he really is just fucking insane and doesn't know when
Well,
to
it doesn't
stop.
really matter, but that whole gambit relies on the notion that everyone else is a rational player.
Yeah.
Well,
But the recently leaked
I mean, as
transcripts...
someone, I think in the same discussion, you might have seen, been listening to the same podcast. They're talking about Kim Jong Un, and he does have he has a very self-interested sort of state of mind. He's looking to save himself at the very least.
He's a student of his father's politics. He just doesn't carry them out as well as Kim Jong-il did, and playing off the superpowers against each other to better North Korea's position. He knew how to raise the heat level, then bring it back down at the right point. It's a delicate game. Maybe Kim Jong-un still learning the knack for it.
He's only young.
No. Xi Jinping was in the news telling America to cool their tits.
Not familiar with that diplomacy speak, but
I think it's from Anchorman. I can't remember. It's one of those sexist movies that...
Slow your roll.
Yeah.
Cool your tits. Comes over much better in the native Putonghua.
Yeah. I was going to say earlier, though, the one thing about Trump that I found interesting from the recently leaked transcripts of his conversation with the Mexican Prime Minister and the Australian Prime Minister is that behind the scenes, he does not represent as such a madman. Like when he was talking to the Mexican Prime Minister, he was like, look, you just can't go saying to the media that you're not going to pay for this, but I'm not going to make you pay for this.
He doesn't come across as insane. More of a bitch. Comes over as a bit more of a bitch, but not insane.
Yeah, so, I mean, that's positive. Maybe he is trying to do the Nixon. Maybe.
I don't think it's intentional. Like, for God's sake, no one can get him off Twitter. It's the weirdest situation that you've got so many. I think he's got 130 million followers on Twitter. That's 130 million people that he can send a message to directly and just say some ungodly bullshit that he's normally getting on.
It is disappointing when you consider how many people he can send a message to directly. And then the content of the messages he chooses to send.
Well, he can... And the fact that he's setting foreign policy via fucking Twitter. Yeah. It's just weird. It's just that... Never seen anything like it before. And Kim Jong-un's joining in on the other side.
To be fair, nor have the Pentagon. Like when he said the transgenders aren't welcome in the military, and the Pentagon were like, we didn't know anything about that.
We didn't sanction that. We're not going to...
We didn't say, that's not true. It's always good when the head of your military's like, that's not true.
So we got our bug out bags ready, guys. We got our last minute supplies. What's our last meal going to be?
This is what I wanted to ask when I mentioned that Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull wants us to join in any, dispute with North Korea. Do you think the Australian public are going to be behind Australia going to war with North Korea? I don't think so.
Some of them will be.
Some, but not in the same way they were into getting on the war of terror, where they perceived that we were potential victims of the war of terror.
No one hates Koreans, North Koreans enough.
I just don't think they care enough
to really care enough about it. Whereas it was easy to roll people up against Muslims and stuff, and even then people are souring on that. We're a little bit war weary around that. Although
I just wonder if this is another Malcolm Turnbull classic miscall.
Maybe he was in Adelaide this week talking to the Liberal Party faithful, labelling Bill Shorten as the most dangerous left-wing leader of the Labor Party movement.
Wow, that radical
generations. This is no longer the party of Bob Hawke and Paul Keating.
That radical Bill Shorten.
Yeah. Like Paul was quite right wing, but Bill is not left wing.
No, he's not. He's not a danger to the status quo.
No. Yeah, when I read that, he was giving the speech to the Liberal Party faithful. Like, really? No one's going to think that Bill's particularly leftist.
Now, if Sally McManus got up there,
if Sally McManus was there, fine, I would get that.
Yeah,
most dangerous.
I think we'd be picking someone out to. We'd be picking someone out to run the guillotines and shit like that for sure. Sally McManus got up there, but Bill Shorten's not. He's not turning over the apple cart in any way.
No, he loves carts.
He loves carts. He likes apples.
He's the man. His politics are those of where the wind's blowing.
He's a neoliberal, right? Yeah. He's mostly a neoliberal and an opportunist as to grabbing some of the progressive sort of policies when they come up. But even then, he doesn't exactly stride over to the left.
Oh, he only ever echo chambers someone else who's already popular.
Yeah. And the things I've noticed on Twitter is Sally McManus will speak up about something, and then maybe a week later, Bill Shorten pipes up or something like that.
Or Jeremy Corbyn, and then a week later, Bill Shorten when he's sure that people are on side with it. Mm. Yeah, no, he's not. Anyway, I just thought that was interesting that old MT is. I don't know. I feel like the rise of Tony Abbott is on.
Well, it depends. Are we a country that's looking to get into more wars? Because if we are, then I could fully believe Tony Abbott actually making a comeback. If the public really wants to do this, join at the hip with the Yanks and get involved in another fucking war or something, then I could believe maybe.
We all saw that recent footage of photos of Tony wearing those awesome leather jackets for the Special Forces designed New York.
Wasn't a bad
brand.
jacket actually.
It was quite a nice jacket.
I want
It
one.
made Tony look pretty good.
Yeah.
Um,
I was looking at that,
but
and
that could be like a campaign
was
poster.
looking
Him
at-
looking
it-
into the future, Special Force jacket.
it was
on.
it was kind of funny because I was reading that news article, and I had the page scrolling up where it was I think the actual designer, and he's in a jacket and he's holding a fucking AR-15 with a scope and shit on it, and he's walking down. He's got two guys on either side, all with weapons, and my partner goes, "What the fuck are you looking at?" It's like a fashion shoot for guns or something.
That wasn't the jacket. That was the military uniforms he's based.
No,
the jacket
that was
design
the
on.
jacket. It was the jacket. It was the black jacket. with the...
I understand. It was a very similar looking jacket. That photo was from where his tour in Afghanistan.
No, he had three guys wearing. We'll bring it up later. It was the jacket. I'm
Okay.
not kidding. It's the jacket.
So apparently your partner thinks you're into combat porn.
That's right. I was going. It's not what you
You're
think it is.
homosexual.
It's not what I think it is. I quickly scrolled up to show her the Tony Abbott leaning on the desk.
I don't know if that
was
makes you
gonna-
court case or not.
Yeah, it's not what you think. It's not what you think. Look, it's Tony looking
Once
sexy.
again, that just raised another question.
Yeah, right. Sorry.
It was amusing.
The only other anecdotal piece of news that I have was there were some riots in Charlottesville,
Oh, that's- I was
Virginia.
gonna
I was
that,
going to
yeah.
bring that up as well. It's
Yeah.
not really anecdotal news. It's terrible.
And someone's died. Yeah.
Yes, so
And
basically,
19 people were injured.
Yeah.
So
And the 20-year-old guy driving the car, 20-year-old guy, has been charged with murder.
and so he should.
No, I know, but 20. It's just depressing that a 20-year-old would be that embroiled in very far right-wing ideology to the point where he would drive a car into 20 people.
So basically,
Deliberately.
it was a protest by the far right extremist groups, Nazis, pro-white, and so forth.
Protesting the tearing down of a General Lee
Yes, statue.
statue.
And so there was an equal on the day
In
there was-
Virginia, his home state as well.
Yeah, so there was an equal number of anti-protesters against the alt-right and Nazis and whatnot protesters. But what I found interesting was Trump refuses to specifically point out the far-right protesters being the main problem point. He kept on being blasé that it was shared responsibility by all
Yeah.
people present.
Yeah, it's not just you that finds that weird. Even the leaders of fairly far right-wing ideologies have come out to say that they haven't been denounced by Trump. Therefore, he's on our side. Therefore, he's against Antifa. He's against a bunch of other movements. They're using this as something of a catch cry to point out that they're right. And even the
They're saying
wizard
by-
of the KKK, someone Duke has come out to say,
Yeah,
David
Duke posted on Twitter to say,
Ex-Grand Wizard.
Donald Trump needs to remember who put him in the White House. It wasn't those radical leftists. It was
Yeah.
people like us. And it's like, fuck, it's not inaccurate.
Yeah. There was a fairly decent turnout. Like some socialist organisations and everything were there as well. And apparently, the girl that was killed was a wobbly. She was one of the.
A what?
There's the old school.
Please tell me she wasn't disabled.
No, Wobbly's the old school international workers.
Okay, that's fine. It's fine. I was worried that you'd be like,
It's an old phrase that's starting to get some reuse nowadays, and it's from way back in the 1910s, 1905. I think it was founded through the 1920s and stuff like that. So, the DSA, the Democratic Socialist Alliance, was well represented there and everything. It was quite interesting to see some photos from it. But yeah, I guess we're going to probably see more clashes like this.
I've spoken about this before. I'm not entirely okay with them pulling down statues of Robert Lee. They're going to have more problems in Virginia as well because there's universities there.
I don't know. It's one of these things. If they want to protest the pulling down the statue and people want to turn out to protest the people who are protesting it, fine.
No, but Washington and Lee University in Lexington, Virginia, the Lee is after Robert E. Lee. He was the president of that university after the war.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, if you want to be okay glorifying...
No, I
Yeah.
know, but they're not going to rename that. And to be fair, the thing about Robert Lee that
Maybe they should. We renamed Doolaroo.
the thing about Robert Lee though is he's more like, say, an Erwin Rommel than he is
Yeah, he was well and truly on board with what they were doing.
He wasn't.
He was. He was very much interested in maintaining states' rights and
Yeah, no, he was pro unification before the war. After Virginia seceded, he went with his state.
he chose his side.
And then after the war, he worked with Andrew Johnson to ensure that reconciliation was successful. And while he was the head of that university,
to make sure Reconstruction was successful,
at the time called Washington College, he personally expelled multiple students.
yeah, but he made sure that we've got to remember
victimising
Reconstruction wasn't necessarily successful. Depending on, it was successful from the white perspective. It wasn't successful from the black perspective. So I don't know how. You know what I mean? It's not.
No. I'm just saying.
not at all
As far as Civil War figures go, Jefferson Davis cunt, right? Robert Lee, not as bad as like his contemporaries at the time.
Less of a cunt.
Do you think the people who are protesting the
Diet Coke of
statues
cunt.
I actually
Robert
thought
Lee are protesting because of his equitable positions on
No,
matters?
I don't. I actually thought it was really sad to see these
It's-
people protesting a statue of a man who would have disapproved of their actions. Like he would have been mortified.
And I think that's why people support the tearing down of these statues, because regardless of what that individual that's commemorated by that statue may have represented, they see that as a symbol for their own racism.
yeah.
And what the people come out to protest it for, they're not protesting it because Robert E. Lee was a wonderful individual, and that's not why they're there. They're not even. It's
They're there
difficult
because of white aggrievement.
It's difficult to even apply crypto fascist to them because they're not being very crypto about it.
Yeah, no.
They're being pretty fucking obvious. So I don't know.
But see, I think the most effective.
If they want to come out, that's not why they're there. That's not why they're there to protest.
That's why
it.
I don't think you should tear the statues down. And I think if anyone comes to point out that the statue should be torn down or defend it from being torn down, particularly cunts like these right-wing guys, you point out that Robert Lee would not have approved of their actions.
So you engage them in
You should give
rational
them a fucking
debate.
history. Give them a fucking history lesson.
You can go out there and give those people a fucking history lesson. I went to Reclaim Australia and no one was interested in fucking history lessons at Reclaim Australia. You're not getting into those discussions with people at that fucking place.
So do you think all the Nazi statues and memorabilia around Germany should have been left in place, or the statues of Hitler and so forth?
I don't know. I think that it's important to remember your history.
Tearing down
You
a
can do it
statue
without
doesn't
statues.
History. And
delete the history.
No, but I'm not saying I would leave I probably wouldn't leave the statues of Hitler up in public places, but I probably would keep them and put them in a museum just so people could appreciate how fucking wrong things went.
Yeah.
Because it's an important lesson not to repeat.
Well, that statue of General Lee could have been moved to a museum.
Yeah, no, it could. It could. And like the problem I say, raise the problem with General Lee because, Robert Lee, I should say, is because I know there are universities named after him. I know he was the chancellor of one. Like, it's going to be a really uphill battle to convince Washington and Lee University to change their name.
Yeah, but, you know, people are amazing. They can remember a second name, you know. People's ability to sort of deal with that sort of change is possible.
Yeah. I mean, names get changed.
We're at the top of the food ladder.
Shit happens.
We should be able to manage that little change.
No,
As I said, we changed Ezrock to Uluru.
We survived.
It's okay.
Sun came up the next day.
That's right.
yeah, but
Nazis were still here. You know,
he's probably
alt-righters
one of the
still survived.
more influential historical figures to come out of Virginia. Like that's his home state. I think it'd be really tough to convince people. And I can understand why people would be like, I don't want to forget that part of
Yeah, I
history.
mean, you got a whole segment of people that Robert E. Lee was very much invested in oppressing, and it's like, well,
he was a general. He didn't oppress people. He just
he was fighting for the side that, and their most successful general fighting for the side that was oppressing them. I mean, you might ask them to draw that distinction, but you're doing it from a position of privilege, just going, hey, dude, he was a pretty good general and he wasn't that bad.
Yeah, well,
the people that were
people
directly
still-
affected by that,
You know,
they may not draw that line.
his tactics are still studied to this day.
They may not
he was
draw
a
that-
very effective.
They
And
may not
they
draw
may
that
well
line.
still be studied even without the statue.
Yeah.
I'm very interested in the history of Julius Caesar. I don't need a statue out the front to
That's
remind me
right.
he exists.
We've got 6 hours of that stuff.
Exactly. So
yeah,
I don't think he'll be forgotten merely because
There was an
his
interesting
statue gets
fact
torn
that
down.
came up. The BLM, Black Lives Matter protests that have been happening for a long time. 0 deaths so far at Black Lives Matter protests. On alt-right one comes along like this and you got 1 death and 19 injured. Some crazy shit going down. Maybe they're just more heated. Who knows?
no, I look. I don't think it has anything to do with the topic, and it has more to do with the fact it was a 20-year-old kid who just was angry, and he's an idiot.
Yeah.
I don't think it could have happened just as easily at a Black Lives Matter protest.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, possibly.
to someone from either side.
There's been a lot.
Like, I mean, counter protests at a Black Lives Matter could just as equally have done the same thing as someone who, like, it doesn't take much for a 20-year-old kid to make a mistake.
Haven't yet. You know what I mean?
Not particularly.
Could have, haven't yet.
I feel like your understanding of statistics is not great in this instance.
Well, there was
there's a statistic, and
no, you got 1 point.
just to support Dean's argument, you did have that guy that went to shoot Republican lawmakers in Washington D.C. So he can have. You just need one crazed person who takes his position too far.
And there was the other one that came up was the bombing of the mosque in Minnesota, which was just sort of passed off, and nobody really talked about it terribly much as well. Which was clearly an act of terrorism, but no one. Yeah,
well, and interestingly enough, there are senators in America calling for this act in Virginia to be labelled an act of domestic terrorism.
Yeah, and you see the same people online going, you need to look at the definition of terrorism. It's very exact, and this doesn't match it exactly. It's like, oh, God.
No.
It doesn't help. You're not helping at all. No, it was an act of terrorism. The fact that it was done by one lone wolf
I don't
is
think
not
it's
a big
cool
deal.
to drive your car into people.
It
doesn't matter if you agree or not. Like, you can disagree civilly and politely and have a conversation. You don't have to try and kill people. That's obscene.
Is it?
Yes.
Oh. Okay, just thought we'd do clarification around that.
Well, apparently we do.
Not amongst us, I'm not sure.
Yeah, no, I was really...
But whether we call it terrorism,
when I saw the kid was 20, it was really disappointing.
This whole thing about calling something terrorism, is it even of much value anymore? Because that word gets thrown around in such an inconsistent manner these days.
Yeah, I don't know. The other thing that was striking, I was looking at photos on Reddit from Virginia, and the number of people there who were, bare-chested, covered in Nazi tats and stuff was pretty fucked up and scary. And there's another photo of a young African-American cop guarding the lines, protecting these people who were basically, white supremacists. And the look on his face is like, I don't want to be here. But, he's there.
Specifically, I don't want to be here.
He's there defending their rights and stopping people who he probably agrees with from taking actions against them.
Well, probably stopping the people from behind him from taking actions against the people that are protesting as well, yeah. There's a good chance of that.
He's keeping them separate, yeah. Let's not assume that the people on our side are necessarily better than the people.
No. I know plenty of Antifa people. As I said, there was a joke I've said to a few leftists. It's like few leftists that I know, and I say, "Come the revolution, please don't let you be running the guillotine," because I'm not sure who would avoid that sort of sentence. Yep. Some people have a very strict definition of what leftist is, and I remember them complaining about specifically talking about something like. Anyone watch The Young Turks still? John Iadarola and that? And they're saying, he's not progressive. He's not progressive. I'm going like, man, if that guy's not progressive enough, we're all losing our heads when these people get in charge.
Yeah, they're not getting in charge.
Not for a while.
I got a thought experiment for you guys, if it indulge you. Let's say for whatever reason, politically, there was the situation heated up in Australia or Western Australia, for example, where alt-righters, white extremists and so forth started doing regular protests, started getting a lot more, throwing their weight around. At what point would tip the point for you to start to confront them? To actually get off?
I've been to them. I've been to two of them so far.
Okay, so you're
Reclaim
there.
Australia. So yeah, I mean,
Dean, is there a point where you feel you would actually front up to one of these?
I'm the reverse. See, I remember when we were being dragged into the Iraq War with Bush, and I was talking to people like, "This is bullshit. Australia's even going." The West Australian Premier at the time was like, "We shouldn't be doing this." And I remember talking to people saying he should fucking secede from Australia, and if they send the military to fight us, we'll fight them here. Like, I'm more likely to do the states' rights thing and be like, "No fucking way are we." So it would depend what they're arguing.
No, but I mean, if they're making protests in the streets, and one of the things you're fighting against normally is the normalisation of this kind of behaviour, and you need to get, if they're out in the streets saying this is the way we want it to be, and they're out there being unchallenged, they're putting those opinions forward unchallenged.
I'm sure you and I have had this conversation before, where I have said to you that I think that most protests are statistically.
But is there a point at which you decide
less than 1% of the population, therefore you're a rounding error? I apply that to all protests.
All protests, right?
All protests.
So at some point,
statistically insignificant, you can safely be ignored because you're a rounding error.
No, but at some point,
you don't affect an election.
At some point, that behaviour is on display and it's being normalised.
Yep.
And it bleeds. And what I'm suggesting,
I don't know if it's being normalised. It gets ignored. I ignore protests.
I don't think it gets ignored. I mean,
even if I happen to agree with their cause, I still think they're wasting their time.
Yeah, but I mean, it's at what point? Okay, so So that behaviour, say anti-Islam behaviour, anti-Islamic rhetoric, at what point does it enter the culture? At what point do you draw the line and say, now it's too much? It's actually endangering someone else's life. Because at some point it does,
we're past
right?
that point, I think. I mean,
then
it's entered mainstream Australian politics. They're in Parliament.
yeah. So at what point do we say something about it? Do we protest?
I don't
against
protest it.
So you just don't protest.
I combat it through the political system. I don't think the protests work. I think you have to fight them in where the power is, which is in government.
Yeah, but I mean, protest is direct action is part of that process.
Okay. I don't think it works. I'm not saying it doesn't. I just don't. I
think it does.
I personally don't think
You're
it does.
not saying it doesn't. You just don't think it does.
Wait, it may work. And, and someone could show me the stats, and I might. I don't think I will. I'll refer to a book 2,000 years old and go, book says it doesn't work.
Yeah.
No, it's just one of my things. I don't know.
What about you, Franco?
Well, I tend to agree with Dean on with all things being equal, generally protests I don't get involved with at all. But I was wondering I was challenging myself at what level would something have to happen before I start going, nah, I've had enough of this. And I'm not talking about just general protests. I'm talking about where it gets to a certain point where those protests start bleeding out into what's happening generally in society.
Taking direct action. Yeah, I mean, you got the idea that a protest is just going out in the street with some signs, but they get much.
I'm thinking, at what point did the protests actually translate into they start bullying people around? They're moving on from protests, and it gains a certain momentum. At what point do I think I would actually?
But you can always just keep having conversations on the internet.
Don't know. I mean, I've never seen that situation.
You can always just keep pumping out podcasts.
Really,
you know what I mean? There's a point at which direct action and power politics, like dominance politics, becomes real. And some of that has street value.
Yeah. I suppose the problem is you don't always see where the tipping point is. And
I'm going to speak on behalf of Dean.
And perhaps it's too late
Dean
to actually
agrees
do
with
anything.
me entirely.
But perhaps by the time you see that you need to act, the momentum's gone past what you can act on.
I don't know. I still think there's even value in getting out there and being visibly opposing. I'm sure these people out in Charlottesville are seeing value in being out there and visibly opposing racists and stuff like that. They don't want to say that, hey, this is okay, you can keep carrying on like this.
Well, perhaps there's more need
Especially
for them to do it because they've got a president that won't condemn their actions.
Yeah, but I mean, so that's the line, is it?
I don't know.
That's the line, you know what I mean? There's obviously a line somewhere where it becomes where it gains more value. And hopefully, if you're in a democratic process that's working, maybe it doesn't require, you don't require it as much. But when you're in a democratic process that just elected a racist to presidency, maybe they need to do more of it. Anyway,
I don't know. I think America's due for
a bloody revolution.
No, just dissolution into separate entities.
Because that'll go easily.
I don't know. I mean, there's too many areas that just don't have enough in common anymore. I mean, they have economic interests in common, but they can achieve that through like a European Union style approach.
No. Yeah. I suppose we could do the same here.
Yeah. No. I again, pro states' rights. I legitimately think
there's certain rights that I think transcend states and need to be enforced at a federal level so that they're common with all states. If you decide that you don't have those rights in common with other states, then by all means secede. But I think there's certain rights that need to be consistent. If we want to call ourselves a nation, they have to be consistent across our... I mean, I'd expand that
You're
globally
anti-nation
as well.
states.
Hey?
You're anti-nation states, though.
I am anti-nation because to me...
Then maybe we don't want to call ourselves a nation.
No, because to me those rights should transcend nation states as well and should be
human rights, basic human rights. So I'm with you.
It means the nation state's a little bit superfluous at that point.
Yep, sure. Not against it. Agreeing with you.
Yeah.
But I just think, look, at the local level, I don't like the way that like someone in Cameron go, yeah, we're tied at the hip to America and we're going in for war. It's like, no, buddy. He's a fucking megalomaniac asshole. I don't really think we should do that.
And you took all our GST. So we're out.
I mean, there is that too.
We're going to wash our hands of the rest of you. We're out. Oh, shit. Indonesia's invading us.
You know what? It's a big desert.
There's not many of us, man.
Yeah, no, but it's a big desert.
They could park a tank in Forest Chase, and I think they'd probably have us.
Yeah, maybe. I don't think Indonesia's going to do that.
Well, maybe not. Maybe not all of the WA. They just go the bits they need,
Well, look,
which are up close to them anyway.
We're nice, friendly trading partners that look after each other.
Oh,
I like to believe in the positive things. I don't think we'll go to war with Indonesia or China ever. I feel like they're friends.
No, well, I don't see there's any point in it. As I said,
I mean, if we could buy barley off them, I'm sure we would. But I don't think we'd ever, go to war over barley.
There's probably times they'd like to give it away.
Yeah, it's your problem.
You look after your own drunk idiots. We don't want to.
all right. Anyone got anything else?
I'm done.
No, I'm way out of material.
We've done. We've gone for over an hour. We need to wrap this up.
Talking shit.
All right.
For
Thanks for
everyone.
listening. I've been Franco.
I've been Jason.
I have been Dean. That's like the high